Well, good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Designing Risk-Based QA Oversight for Clinical Trials under ICH E6R3. My name is Ryan Muse and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and your comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using the same chat panel. I'd also like to welcome our attendees viewing this presentation from our LinkedIn Live event, and I encourage you to submit your questions as well via the comments tab. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming to those who have registered on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank ADAMAS Consulting, who developed the content for this presentation. ADAMAS Consulting is a leading global specialist consultancy providing independent quality assurance and quality management services across GCP, GLP, CSC, and GMP. With offices across 3 continents, they deliver expert compliance solutions to pharmaceutical, biotech, and healthcare organizations worldwide. For over 25 years, ADAMAS has conducted thousands of GXP audits in 100 plus countries for 800 plus international clients, ensuring the highest regulatory and quality standards. Now, I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Shahnaz Vakaria is a leading professional in the global pharmaceutical industry with 28 years of experience in clinical research, specializing in good clinical practice quality management system consulting and audits. In the past 2 decades, she established and scaled up 2 GXP audit firms in India and founded and co-directed a diploma course in clinical research in collaboration with St. Xavier's College, Mumbai. And with over 25 years in the pharmaceutical industry, Dr. Artem Adrianov is a leading expert in clinical data quality and biostatistics. As the CEO of Cyntegrity, he specializes in data-driven risk management in clinical trials. His academic background includes a PhD in mathematical modeling and an executive MBA. Dr. Adrianov co-founded Cyntegrity in 2013 with a focus on advancing RBQM. But now, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand the mic over to our first speaker for today, Shahnaz Vakaria. You may begin when you're ready.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the webinar on designing risk-based QA oversight for clinical trials, complying with ICH E6R3 requirement. In this webinar, we would like to demonstrate how data-enabled risk intelligence can be systematically derived from clinical trial data to support risk-based, proportionate, and fit-for-purpose QA strategies. As we all know, ICH E6R3 requires sponsors to apply quality assurance throughout the clinical trial and implement risk-based strategies to identify causes of serious non-compliance with the protocol, GCP, and applicable regulations. In addition, ICH E6R3 also requires that audits should be conducted in a manner proportionate to the risk associated with the trial. And as you will see in my next slide, what we need to do in order to do a risk proportionate or in order to design risk proportionate QA oversight, it is first of all imperative to identify critical to quality factors for the study. Now, what are these critical to quality factors? These are attributes of a clinical trial that are fundamental to the protection of rights, safety, and well-being of study subjects, and the reliability and interpretability of the trial results. According to ICH E6R3, you need to identify the CTQs right at the beginning, proactively at the stage of protocol design. Once the CTQs are identified, you need to then identify the risk to the critical to quality factors. Should something go wrong, would it affect the safety of the participants? Would it affect the reliability of the trial results? Once you've identified these risks, you need to evaluate these risks. And these are evaluated considering, the impact that these risks, if they materialize, could have on patient safety, on data integrity, on the reliability of the trial, the likelihood of occurrence, and the detectability. Now, as Dr. Artem will show in his demo, how we could identify the risk, how we will be able to evaluate the risk, using data analytics. Once you have identified and evaluated the risk, you need to define key risk indicators and quality tolerance limits. Again, Dr. Artem will demonstrate how those can be devised. Once you have devised and defined the KRIs and the QTLs, you will be able to run or identify from the data, and we will show you how in a minute. Using data analytics, we will be able to identify high-risk sites, high-risk subjects, data anomalies, and then these kind of go and sit in your audit universe. And once you've completed the audits, those should also directly feed in back to the CTQ, and the circle continues. And as you will see in my next slide, ADAMAS has devised a risk proportionate approach to quality assurance, where we identify the CTQs, we identify custom key risk indicators along with the client. And then once these are then programmed in Cyntegrity's MyRBQM system, once the study data starts coming in and the algorithm starts running, we would be able to see, from the output, which sites are coming up as high risk, which parameters are coming up as high risk, what are the systemic issues, what are the non-compliances, what are the data anomalies, and what are the data integrity issues. And once you review the outputs from the MyRBQM system, we are able to then identify and target the sites which seem to have the highest possible risk of the KRIs that are meaningful to us. And conducting the risk proportionate audits, once you conduct that, the CAPA and the corrective and the preventive actions would then once again feed in, and you may revise your QTLs, revise your key risk indicators, and the cycle continues till the study ends. And this is precisely what ICH E6R3 requires. And this is precisely what we would like to demonstrate today, as you will see in my next slide. We would like to demonstrate it using a case study. Now, what is this case study upon? The case study is for head and neck cancer involving oral cavity and oropharynx. The sites, there are 30 sites. Primary objective is progression-free survival. Secondary objectives were overall response rate and duration of response and safety profile. And the response were evaluated using RECIST version 1.1. Next slide. The high-risk criteria identified for this case study were target lesion misevaluation, which had a direct impact on the primary and secondary objectives. The safety-related criteria, which was high risk, which was identified as insufficient hydration, because these are head and neck cancer patients. And insufficient hydration can relate or result into dryness of the throat, and that can result into more complications and more serious adverse events. The high percentage of dropouts are related to study validity. So these were the high-risk KRIs that were related to the study. Now, Artem will demonstrate, how we used the MyRBQM system for this particular case study, and what did we identify? Over to you, Artem.
Thank you, Shanaz. Yeah, that's a fantastic introduction. Very much. Thank you very much. Let us dive into the more practical experience. In the context of the preparation of these case studies, of course, a lot has happened beforehand. So we analyzed the protocol, identified CTQs, identified the key risk indicators and quality tolerance limits. and connect it to recording systems of a sponsor so that these key risk indicators and quality tolerance limits could be calculated in advance. Very essential element of whole this exercise is, of course, involvement of experts. So critical thinking is as important as critical processes and critical data. So therefore, analysis of the protocol, that's what it usually starts with, is an essential element of searching and understanding, so to say, what are the potential hazards embedded in this particular protocol, embedded in the study. So what do you see right now on your screens? So this is the case study which I'm going to use with the neck cancer that Shanaz has introduced. So we kind of already see inside of kind of the Meyer-Beacon portal the preliminary assessments of these risks. But as Shanaz mentioned, we want to start with identification of critical to quality factors. So in order to do that, I'm diving into the dedicated section, identify CPCD, so critical processes and critical data. And I can navigate here that system together with AI assistance. Yeah, this is actually human interaction with AI assistance could identify all the critical processes involved or described in the protocol or mentioned in the protocol. So many of them are very, very specific to this study. So, and many of them are generic for a GCP environment. Yeah, for example, dropouts, dose modification, enrollment efficiency, of course. But as we mentioned, as one of the primary endpoint is RECIST assessment. It's of course mentioned here, and target lesion evaluation, which is again here mentioned as well. What does it mean? Yeah, we first initially documented what is critical for the quality and for the study, and continuing our journey with assessing the risks around these critical processes, how that happens. So in order to assess the risk, we are moving into the well-known framework introduced by Transcelerate approximately 7 or 8 years ago, and modified by Transcelerate a couple of times. So it's called Risk Assessment and Categorization Tool. And this tool, in fact, provides us already well-defined categories of risks: safety, milestones, enrollment, complexity. So all in all, 14 categories. As we remember, target lesion misevaluation happens in endpoints, and that's actually where we are moving. And this is the risk which is here documented, target lesion misevaluations. Due to various errors, again, we might specify the cause or leave it generic as it is here mentioned. And of course, study non-evaluability may result. So as you see, it's high impact risk, high probability. That means it might happen with the over 80% probability, and detectability. So medium detectability. That means it is difficult to detect in a way without automatized systems. And that's why automatized systems were introduced as mitigation actions. By the way, it's very important to specify criteria. How do you identify, for example, probability? And these criteria here are listed. And again, these are more sponsor-specific criteria, but important is to be aligned while you're doing the assessment of the risks. So it's crucial to understand what each of these category of the risk property means. High probability. I was speaking about 80% higher or 60%, like it is mentioned here, higher. Yeah. So, or impact, what is high? Impact in this particular case, high impact is of course connected with patient safety, and that's why it is so crucial and so high. Okay, but of course, many participants now might use, okay, how we connect the risks to the critical process we just were talking about. And that's exactly what is mentioned, what is happening here. So the critical processes which were mentioned, which are listed in the and we have documented in the previous section, all are listed here. And we, of course, here already connected this risk to this particular critical process and connected to the critical data. Why this element is so important? Because later we want to return back, and assess based on the risk indicator escalations, what processes hit, so to say, were hit the most, and what processes need improvements. What processes probably need to revision. And this is where this connectivity starts playing a crucial role. Okay. So we assessed the risk, we categorized the risks and documented and made a release. Now what? Now, as we remember, there are a set of risk indicators which were set up, and they were running in the background, processing the data every day from all our recording systems. Yeah, these are not one or another, not only EDC system, not only CTMS. These are the whole family of recording systems involved in the clinical trial needs to be involved, so to say, in our risk management ecosystem. And that provides us assessments of the risks for all centers. That's what we see here. Some of these centers are of a low risk, some of them are of a medium risk, and some of them are high risk. And we could also navigate, and see already how many escalations, how many risk indicators kind of fired, and that's why it contributed to this high risk. However, we don't only watch the risk profile itself, we also want to know what impact this risk might have on our data, and that's why we want to navigate and see how many visits, for example, number of visits, is that what key metric mentioned here, number of visits. So we want to focus on those centers who had the most visits, or quite significant number of patient visits, which guide us into weighted score, and that's actually leaves us with the analysis or 4 centers which we would want to take as auditors into the more deeper analysis before we decide to include these centers into the risk-based audit universe. So one particular center I'm picking up, not the first one, because this center has enrolled too few patients. I want to pick up the center which has the highest risk score and the high number of patients. So, by the way, all the names of the centers are for demo purpose only. It has nothing to do with the real sites. And I explicitly want to mention this disclaimer here. Okay, so what do we see here? We see actually a heartbeat of a center, and quite interestingly, notice already the 18 subjects are enrolled, 2 big number for adverse events, and only 1 serious adverse event. So that might already trigger some sort of alarm clocks in our alarm bells in our auditor brains, and actually we want to analyze the risk indicators in a more precise way. So what we see that quite a significant number of dropouts started to happen. So from so this number always remained quite severe. So 80% of patients dropped out from the center. That's already alarming for us and for our analysis. So there's something might go wrong with the treatment of patients because again, this indicator shows compared to the other centers, so to say that this particular center has significant number of dropouts. We were worried about target lesion misevaluations, and that's exactly what happens here. So this center particularly misses the or misevaluates the target lesions. So this is again one of the serious problem we were worried about, and actually that's what is happening here. And we noticed that quite a number of dehydration cases are indeed escalated, and that might be a signal already for us to understand the problem with the dropouts. So hydration is particularly important for the patients with neck cancer because due to the usage of medications, the mouth and so it's dehydrated. So again, that's also quite a severe indication that something is with the treating of the patient is not as good as it is supposed to be. And quite significant, what I see, the two indicators, high number of adverse events and low number of adverse events, both fire for the center. What does it mean? It means that system compared the rate of adverse events per patient week or per patient month across all the studies and all the centers. And particularly this center shows a high number of adverse events. And comparing to other centers, so in this case per visit, it was normalized by visits, and it shows that there is particularly low number of serious adverse events. That gives us a chance to consider that might be there is a misinterpretation of adverse events and serious adverse events are documented as adverse events. So this is a serious safety breach already that might give us a chance to already to plan maybe audits directly on site there and verify the adverse events seriousness. Going through this type of section, and these alarms blocks are quite worrying altogether. So we understand now the situation about the center. We understand pretty well where this center is struggling. They are enrolling a lot of patients, but producing, in fact, quite dangerous data and actually treating the patients dangerously as well. All right, then let us dive a bit further into the data itself, and maybe we could use some statistical methods to identify outliers. And here we would use a tool which is called centralized statistical monitoring. And many of you have heard that there are different types of centralized statistical monitoring, supervised and unsupervised. So here we're dealing with a supervised version of centralized statistical monitoring, and later I will show you some example of an unsupervised one. So here we see that Shinaz has analyzed the target critical data and has created certain statistical tests. By the way, there's no programming required, no configuration required. These statistical tests could be applied on data set literally by every auditor or every project manager at any moment. Yeah, so literally you select a domain and say, I want to analyze the data. Yeah, and there's no need to be statistician to applying these tests. Yeah, they're very much self-explanatory to some extent. But you need to have, of course, not to be scared about seeing some plots like this. Yeah. So, and here the target lesion misevaluations were selected, insufficient hydration cases. And what do we see? We see that this center 0802, which exactly was under our investigation already before, is on the boundary of being an outlier. It's not outlier yet, but it's a boundary on being outlier. And the same is happening with the centers with the here the same, yeah. So on these insufficient hydration cases. So in another test which we could select here, it's quite similar situation. And here in the scatter plotting, where everything is compared to and presented and plotted with everything, we could already also see that when we plot target lesion misevaluations with insufficient hydration cases, this dot is actually correlating with exactly this site. So 0802. So exactly that's actually creates for us let's say a coherent story, yeah, that using different methods, we are coming more or less to similar conclusions. When we were talking about unsupervised CSM, just for everybody's understanding, this is where system is able to process the inconsistencies in data automatically without any involvement of a human. And this is actually looks a bit differently, and very classical presentation of that is heat map, yeah. So which is again kind of can plot different data points, like for example here lab parameters, and highlight those lab parameters where the inconsistencies is too high, yeah. And when we select this center but with one particular lab parameter, we see how many outliers this center generates, yeah, in comparison to, for example, this center where there are a couple of the outliers. This is this center has particularly high number of outliers. So this generates inconsistency score, you know, Z score, and this inconsistency score might guide us as well in order to identify those centers, which, for example, particularly in the lab with the lab parameters, might have kind of wrong procedures of taking lab samples or preserving lab samples or analyzing lab samples. And this is in fact also very commonly connected with the problems of local labs. And this is very easy to identify those local labs where the results are inconsistent with the whole cohort. So unsupervised CSM, supervised CSM, these are mechanisms and tools in a tool set of a modern auditor to help to find those targets for involvement in the risk-based audit universe. Shinaz, do you want to add here anything or comment on that?
Hi. So this is precisely, you know, what we discussed earlier, that data analytics can really augment quality assurance auditing processes, and, you know, allows quality auditors to focus on the risk that matters and conduct risk-based QA oversight. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So the modern world of an auditor is in fact very much linked to awareness about the risks, yeah, awareness about critical processes, awareness about hazards, and these are hazards which are existing on different levels, for example, on a global scale or intra-company level or intra-study level. So these hazards influence the way how sites operate, how they treat patients, what type of data they collect. and how reliable and reproducible the results are. Yeah, and that helps definitely to focus your attention to those centers where the audit is the most helpful. Yeah, so where the audit will provide the most of the practical results for sponsor and for patients at the end of the day as well. All right, so briefly, we looked, as I mentioned, we looked into the risks. We analyzed the critical to quality factors. We analyzed the risk assessments, analyzed the centers, how they are ranged, so to say, via risk. We picked up one center for particular specific analysis, analyze the problems that the center has. So already we have an agenda, probably with some questions about safety and about the dropouts and about the target misevaluation. So there is a plenty of questions already. We verified our assumptions with additional methods, yeah, using centralized statistical monitoring in a supervised and unsupervised way, and all of them has shown that our assumptions are correct. And that's actually give us quite enough confidence to conclude about the next steps, particularly for the center, and maybe a couple of others as well. And again, the same way we would analyze the further sites, and again in this particular study, 4 sites which would require particular our attention. But what again, maybe that's also important to understand also how these risk indicators were documented and were calculated. So in modern inspection world and auditor world, there's an important area which remains maybe not very commonly touched by solutions, RBQM solutions, but it's in my eyes very, very important area, is reliability of these escalations. And in order to convey or guarantee the reliability, my RBQM portal particularly provides an audit trail of calculations. And this is in fact very, very crucial element which guides and can help me to understand what are the raw data and what are the calculational details were taken for this particular risk indicator. And again, in every risk indicator section, there is an icon here which could be clicked, and it provides you the full audit trail of a calculation. Again, I will skip it for this demo in order to save some time, but again, that's to my mind important to mention. So in a world where risk indicators becoming an essential part of decision making, we have to absolutely be crystal clear about the way how they are calculated. And these are particularly in a more complex way of KRIs, yeah, using maybe artificial intelligence or mathematical modeling or statistical methods, particularly for detecting certain risks. This audit trail of calculations becomes an important and essential element. So with that, I want to hand over to Shanaz with concluding remarks, and then we'll have time for taking the questions.
Sure. So we looked at how data analytics can actually help us. And if you look at the traditional way of selecting sites, traditionally so far QA has been focusing on highest recruiting sites, fast recruitment, high number of protocol deviations, high number of screen failures, high number of dropouts. But when we use risk-based methodology and couple it with data analytics, we can actually cover a whole lot of area, including, high risk KRIs that have got realized, data integrity issues, data anomalies, in addition to all the standard factors. And that is the beauty of using data analytics coupled with the quality assurance knowledge. And as you can see, we can conclude, or in summary, we can say that the use of data analytics can definitely augment quality assurance activities to identify and to prioritize the underlying drivers of non-compliance with the protocol, with GCP, and the applicable regulations, and enable quality assurance teams to move from periodic retrospective checks to continuous insight-driven oversight in compliance with ICH E6R3 requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanaz.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much, both of you, for this very insightful presentation today. As we move into the Q&A portion of the webinar, I want to remind the audience to keep sending their questions or comments using the questions window. For those watching on LinkedIn Live events, you can also send in your thoughts into the comments section. We'd love to see it coming in there. But we have received some questions already from the audience, quite a lot. So we're going to get started with our audience questions. The very first one that I have for you here wants to know, just very simply, is this system built in-house, and do you think Power BI can be used for this purpose?
Yeah, maybe I could address. So this system is out of the box available for sponsor companies, auditor companies, and of course we have a very strong partnership with ADAMAS, where particularly the questions of the risk-based audit were included. Power BI is, of course, a technology where everything begins. Yeah. However, in GCP relevant environment, there are certain standards required for being compliant. For example, user access rights needs to be guaranteed. Versionizing of each particular step, documentation and audit trail for these steps, for example, tackling the actions or doing the actions for those centers where risk indicators escalated. So that's where Power BI falls short. And it can present a dashboard, but actually it's not about the dashboards. It's about the process of which again written in GCP and required to do certain activities by default, mentioned, for example, in the FDA CFR 21 Part 11, which is absolutely essential to stay compliant for systems like that. So Power BI is a good starting point for thinking what you want to measure, how you want to measure. But whenever it comes to productional ready, enterprise ready, so to say, RBQM environment, other aspects, compliance aspects, becomes very, very essential. Shanaz, maybe, I don't know if you want to address here something.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. Thank you very much for that answer, Artem. The next question up here, it says, in the context of GCPR3, are critical to quality CTQ factors identified first, or are they identified in parallel with risk identification to inform mitigation planning?
Okay, I'll take this one. So according to ICH E6R3, the critical to quality factors need to be identified at protocol design level, because it's not only for the sake of quality assurance, but it is also to ensure that quality is maintained throughout the clinical trial, even for operations. So ICH E6R3 is really, it imbibes the principles of ICH E8, and which is quality by design. So it does have to be incorporated first, and then the risks that are identified are identified based on the critical to quality factors. You could, if you wanted to identify a laundry list of risks, you could have a lot of risk identified, but your risk also should be focused on the critical to quality factors. That is what ICH E6R3 really proposes. That everything, whether it is quality control or whether it is quality assurance, whether it is operations, it all needs to be focused and proportionate to the risk that are included in the study, but the risks are those which affect subject safety, data integrity, and the reliability of the clinical trial.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer. Next up question here is wondering, is there a specific format that the study data needs to be in for upload to the system for analysis?
So short answer is no. In the modern world, systems for analytics are capable to analyze different formats. Nevertheless, I must say that in our experience, there were a lot of situations where the inside, so to say, of even one solution inside of one EDC system, we saw certain format issues, let's say. And actually, through the years of polishing and kind of the integrational capabilities, the system is currently able to do the best, so to say, out of the data available. If some of our participants consider their data strategy, consider their choice of vendors for recording of the data, for example, I could tell that for sure a well-defined data strategy helps in the further steps of analytics. And it's supposed to be happening, so to say, before RBQM, for example, gets introduced. So data warehousing is an essential element for all the future steps, even involving, for example, agentic AI later on. That's actually a good basis to start with. So formats, it's not a problem, but the data strategy is that actually what it comes to in the modern world.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Next question here. Someone says, as a small sponsor organization that doesn't have CTSM, etc., and uses the capabilities of the CRO, how can we benefit from this tool? Can we feed it data with data extracts provided by the CRO?
Short answer, yeah, sorry, Srinivas, I will jump in. Short answer, yes, of course, and I think you should, particularly as a small sponsor. So nothing against CRO's world, but you need to understand again that CRO is actually those who are involved in the process of acquisition data or creating the data. What does it mean? It means that by default, CRO it has a conflict of interest. So this conflict of interest drives certain kind of bias in assessing the risk, and it drives the bias in providing the results. We see it all over the place, I must admit. So as a small sponsor particular, you will save a lot of money, even in fact, if you would evaluate the quality of the work of the CRO independently. This, by the way, happens in other industries, even by law. Yeah, so in finance industry, there are some organizations like Standard & Poor's or Fitch. They evaluate the risks, and they are not involved in any other procedures, and even by law prohibited to do that. So the conflict of interest is quite significant burden, let's say, and particularly important in the risk assessment world. So as a small sponsor, you need to be aware about that and define again this future ecosystem, let's say, of collaboration with the CRO in a way that is most beneficial for participants, for subjects, and for sponsor company.
Perfect, thank you. Next up, someone says, is there an industry standard guidance that provides guidance how particular risk identifications, I'm sorry, I'm going to start this again. Is there any standard guidance that provides guidance on how particularly risk indications could be weighted to reach the final conclusion, and what is the risk assigned to the site? Are there particularly weights different per trial, or is this one per sponsor?
I think I'll let Artem answer this as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is very important and essential topic. So there are standards which speaks about the kind of guidance of assessing the risk, which I mentioned already. One of the earlier standards were introduced by Metrics Champion Consortium, where they particularly started with this whole discussion, which were published in the white papers about how to define the risk. So with this risk statement, how to assess the risk with these particular guidelines. And then, very important, how to link the risk to the site. And that's exactly very deep going question. So at Cyntegrity, we solve this using the so-called FMEA framework, failure mode error analysis. I think that's actually, so FMEA framework is one of the golden standards in this particular way. So, and yes, it is actually weighted based on the risk assessment and then linked to the center, and then the escalations themselves. So the risk escalation participate into the risk ranking, so to say. So the number of escalations and the importance of the risk, it all contributes to the risk ranking of a center. So, but now, as far as I'm aware, different vendors are solving this topic differently. Again, I can only say that Cyntegrity is following FMEA standards. And again, we particularly pay attention to the frequency and phase of a study, because certain escalation, certain risk indicators, for example, start playing a role in certain phase. In the beginning, under enrollment is maybe not so important, but near to the middle of the study, it becomes an important risk indicator. So these phase specific parts contribute as well to the weighting, time window, frequency of escalation, and but this is science on itself and probably deserves a separate webinar.
Very good. Well, maybe the people can look forward to that soon at some point. For our next question here, I've got someone just wondering, how do you plan to mitigate differently the risks based on their scores? And further, how does a score influence the mitigations?
I'll take this one. So when you identify the risk using whichever method, and in this case we use data analytics and the MyRBQM system. But once you identify the risk, once you identify you realize that the risk has been it has happened. In that case, what you need to do is, first you need to do a root cause analysis, and you need to deep dive and identify the causes for that. Only then you will be able to mitigate. So the system and this whole process is there to assist you in identifying the issues, assist you in identifying and rating them as to what is the high risk, what is the low risk, where is it important, what risks are important for the study and the critical to quality parameters. But in order to put in the mitigation actions, you need to understand why the risk has materialized.
And I can add to that, I would also strongly suggest after these actions is to think about preventative actions for the future. It's particular for some kind of escalation which happens systematically, which affects critical part of your study. Do not stop on the correcting this mistake only or correcting this risk only. Look at the root cause analysis, and usually there are many root causes. It's not one, but a combination of root causes, and build the preventative actions for each of the part of the root cause, which will help you to prevent similar situations in the future and actually improve quality overall systematically. And that's actually maybe in other studies, maybe share this best practice with other studies, with other teams, saying, oh, this is a useful lesson we want to share with you. So integrate these preventative actions before even before anything happened, because we had such situations already here. So one of the elements I would say the risk-based approach really drives is actually breaking the silos between the teams and between the groups, different groups within organizations, which in fact, to my mind, is still a big problem. So this isolation still. So good quality begins with information sharing, with also lessons learned, with a revision of the previous mistakes, and driving the preventative actions, which really tackles the root cause, and not generic, so to say, just for the sake of writing something.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that answer. We have time. We're going to do another question here. Someone's saying that at a small sponsor organization, they're curious, what are your thoughts on who should be responsible in the process and using the tool? They say a small sponsor won't necessarily have a central monitor role in-house. So do you think it's clinical research, QA? Just sort of what are your thoughts on that?
So if you're a small sponsor, ADAMAS can help you. As an independent company, Cyntegrity can help you as an independent tech provider. But yes, jokes apart, if you're a small company and if you try to implement the MyRBQM system, ideally, both operations and QA can use the system simultaneously. QA will look at it from the QA lens. Operations will look at it from operation lens in terms of highest recruiting subjects, whether the recruitment is on track, how, if there are any dropouts, why are the sites, going slow, etc. Whereas the QA guys will look at it from a quality assurance lens, looking at, the importance of the data that is coming in, whether the data has any data integrity issues, why, as Artem has demonstrated in the case study, for the head and neck cancer, there were so many patients who had the hydration not correct, and that is a huge safety issue with the study. And that means that either there has been a systemic or systematic issue with educating the investigator sites, educating the monitors. How did the monitors not pick up? Why is the study showing so many misevaluations? Where did it go wrong? So both, it depends upon both the way operations look at it and the way quality assurance look at it.
I can, definitely confirm that I fully agree in agreement with Shanaz. So it's not a role which sits in one department and in one group again. So understanding of the risks should be cross-functional. It influences different departments by default. And it's part of the new way how we do trials. In fact, we need to think in a risk-based way now. And actually, we thought as well in the past, and those who are kind of long time in the industry, of course, kept in mind, oh, this can go wrong, but now we're doing it in a bit systematic way. So we document that things and involve technology to help us, to assist us with routine assessment or routine calculations. That's actually creates an environment where we could jump in, analyze, and then drive our actions based on the data, data-driven decisions. And that's literally helps, very severely helps in operations. Of course, it helps in the QA. And of course, it's in medical monitoring is also benefits from that because they can also assess the patient-specific safety issues, looking at subject profiles, for example, or looking at protocol deviations. So these are the part of RBQM nowadays as well. Particular for small organizations, small sponsor organizations, I would suggest really start from top management to communicating about the new way of thinking, let's say, a new way of doing clinical trials. And that's actually how to improve reliability of our results, the reliability of our success. And that's what top management for sure hopefully understand already as well. So compliance is one of the elements, quality improvement is another element, but also that we are coming to a success in a more reliable way as an organization.
Yeah, I would like to add to that it is really important that every what do you say, division within a company, whether it is operations, whether it is QA, and whether it is medical monitoring, they all are looking at the same data. They all are looking at the same signals. They all are looking at the same alerts, and that is a real recipe for success of a clinical trial.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much for your answer to that question and for all the questions, but we have reached the end of our time here today. To our audience, if we couldn't attend to your questions, know that the team at ADAMAS Consulting and Cyntegrity will follow up with you, or if you have some further questions, you can direct them to the email address that's up on the screen. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen if you click the exit button, and your participation is appreciated as it helps us to improve our webinars. Additionally, I've also shared a link to view the recording of today's event in the chat box, which you can also share with your colleagues so they may register for the recording here as well. For those watching via LinkedIn Live events, we also encourage you to visit xtalks.com so that you can register for this event and then gain access to features such as viewing the recording and more. Now, please join me once more in thanking our speakers for their wonderful time here today. We hope that you found the webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.